Welcome to Rants and Reason. I am Chuck.
I am Karen.
I am a liberal.
And I am a conservative. And as Abraham Lincoln reminds us, we are not enemies, we are friends. And welcome to Meme Monday. It's Meme Monday, Chuck.
Yay!
Well, I have to say, this whole process has definitely been a learning one. As we're working to make ourselves better, we're trying to figure out how we want to format our shows. And because we're seeking to educate ourselves, we decided to take a more scientific method approach to dissecting the memes and the misinformation that's out there. Each week, we're planning to do 2 memes. One that seems believable, an appeal to probability fallacy, but will need deeper explanation, and we'll do one that's based on more blatant fallacies that we will just take some time to identify each week.
Now, there's a lot of information being floated out there due to the teacher demonstration, so we went with an education theme for this episode. So This meme looks to be from one of those demonstrations. It's a sign that says things that make you go, It's a woman holding a sign that has 3 columns: state, funding, imprisonment. The states are listed as follows: Massachusetts, first in funding, 49th in imprisonment. New Jersey, second in funding, 42nd in imprisonment. Oklahoma, 49th in funding, second in imprisonment. And Louisiana, 50th in funding, first in imprisonment.
So basically, according to this, low funding automatically equals high imprisonment.
That's what she's trying to tell us.
Yeah. So here are our guesses as to the truthability of this meme. Is that a word, truthability?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's truth. It's truthier.
It's truthier?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. What do you think?
Well, on first glance, the funding part looks like it might be correct, but being used out of context due to the size of the states.
Yeah. My guess is that the incarceration rate is probably going to be based on the more economically depressed areas and not actually on education funding. So I think the rates will probably be close to the truth, but really have nothing to do with funding rates. I have no preconceived notions as to how much money each state gets funding-wise. I really don't know.
Now we get into what the research says. So you have no preconceived notions, but I'm going to tell you. Because I researched this all day.
Did you? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I took the funding part of this meme. The first obvious thing I noticed is that she didn't count DC. So I hope she doesn't teach government. And DC, by our measures, ranks first in spending per pupil, which is just one of the many metrics to measure by. We started by looking up overall funding from the 2017 Census Education Funding Reports. By using census data, we honestly could find no way to arrive at these funding conclusions. Now, dismantling the generalized term of funding was a nightmare.
Yeah.
One problem was that there was no standardized fiscal measurement to gauge cost per student. Each state uses a different form of measurement as to what makes up cost per student. So we did the best we could with the education department reports based on state statistics. Basically, the problem is that measurement metrics are not transparent. And because it would take forever to delve into every single aspect of funding, which you seem to have no problem doing, we're going to make a couple of logical assumptions here since there were really no real good, accurate standard sources. And the first being that the image in the meme was from one of the recent teacher demonstrations. And the second, that by funding, they mean the 2 relevant forms of measurement: wages and benefits per state budget and funding per student. Going by the wage per budget, smallest ranking is most funding. Massachusetts is 25th. New Jersey is 35th. Louisiana is 12th. Oklahoma is 50 out of 51 because we knew that DC counted.
Yeah, we did. And it's interesting there that Louisiana is higher than Massachusetts and New Jersey, which is what the meme indicated were the highest.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting.
And if you go by funding per student, Massachusetts is 12th, New Jersey is 4th, Louisiana is 18th, and Oklahoma is 48th, which explains why I have never met anyone from Oklahoma who can do basic math. So go ahead.
I don't know what to say to that. I am, in fact, from Oklahoma, sort of. And I can't do basic math, so that's probably true. But I can research a lot. Does that count?
You can research until I want to tear my eyes out with a spoon, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's true. Oklahoma is one of the lowest consistently in all the forms of measurement. So, that's why there's the teacher demonstrations and the protests that are happening in Oklahoma. It's very, very, very relevant, and it's very true, the things that are coming out of there. So, one aspect of this discussion that I think is really important is property taxes and the possible correlation between those and education funding. I started to look up property taxes for every single state and district, but then Chuck stopped me before I went completely insane.
Or before I just quit the podcast.
I got a little obsessed.
Yeah, I'd had enough.
My main point that I was trying to make was that a person can't say that they're for states' rights, yet complain about their property taxes and complain about a lack of school funding without getting federal funding assistance. If you want lower property taxes, then federal education money kind of has to make up that difference. Also, when we looked at the detailed federal budgets from 2009 and the proposed 2018 budget, we found very little disparity overall. There were certain projects that each president tended towards, but overall, the budget appropriations pretty much stayed the same or had very small differences.
Now, one thing that surprised me when we researched this was that Bush Jr.,
who most people call W.
Bush Jr. had a more generous educational budget than Clinton or Obama. And that kind of flies in the face of the narrative often given by the left.
Well, I think that, there was probably a lot more to it than that. We don't want to overgeneralize, but it was something that we found several times when we were examining the national budgets, the education department budgets.
Actually, Bush was kind of an outlier in the raises in education funding.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And we're going to be putting all the statistics on the page, and we are working hard to compile show notes with all of the statistics that we have looked up. So there are a lot. So if you want to research independently based on the statistics we have, they're coming, I promise.
And we double dog dare you to prove us wrong because we've been through everything.
We did work really hard. So, okay. When it comes to the incarceration data, I compiled all the information from the last most detailed Bureau of Justice Statistics report, which included numbers from 2015. There have been some generalized reports since then, like some summary reports, but they didn't do a detailed breakdown of accurate data. The categories used to define incarceration for this project was supervised corrections, which included parole, community supervision, etc., and prison population, including jails. And for this purpose, we only used incarcerations of people that were over the age of 18. According to these means of measurement, the highest states were, for supervised incarcerations, it was Georgia, and for prisons, it was Louisiana. So Georgia and Louisiana were the highest, and the lowest states were, for supervised corrections, was New Hampshire, and for prison was D.C. So, and Maine and Massachusetts were tied for the next spot. So I then researched incarceration rates according to each state, and I utilized the information from the Sentencing Project, who actually utilized the same 2015 justice statistics that I did. The two states with the highest incarceration rates are indeed Louisiana and Oklahoma. But I don't know if they mixed in supervised corrections, which are considered part of the overall incarceration rate. So I'm not really sure if that was added in there and how that would have skewed it. However, the lowest rates overall were Massachusetts and Maine, not Massachusetts and New Jersey like the meme claims.
But there were a bunch of Oklahomans in jail.
There were,
okay.
Yes. Also, these statistics do reflect inmates that are 18 and older. So if we looked at the younger rates, the stats might look totally different.
But there would still be a lot of Oklahomans in jail.
Let's move forward. Okay, this is what we learned.
In regards to this specific meme, the lowest resources per student were Texas, and California was second. Lowest wage percentage per state budget was Florida and Oklahoma. Highest wage spending rates were Utah and Virginia. Highest per student spending rate was Alaska and Vermont. The meme's funding claims were wrong.
The state incarceration rates did back up the claim that Oklahoma and Louisiana had the highest rates. And although Massachusetts was actually tied with Maine, D.C. had the lowest rates. So the claims in the meme were partially true. But again, we don't know if supervised corrections were added to that. We don't know the age statistics. There's very little information. But on its face, there's some truth to it.
Well, the overall attempt to correlate and assume causation fails because the funding assumptions are inaccurate, making the incarceration rates irrelevant, hence the meme is false.
Right. Yep. For sure. It's false.
False. The only thing we learned from this is that, Oklahomans are not a bright bunch of people and they're convicts.
You know what? That is not true. To all my fellow Okies out there, it's okay. Just ignore him. Just ignore him. Let's move forward.
Our last meme is just a quick meme where we identify fallacies.
You know what? I'm going to stop you for just a second. So you were putting me down. On the script, very clearly, it said, Chuck says, making the incarcerations irrelevant, so, hence making the meme. And then it says, Karen, false. The guy from Ohio couldn't read it properly, so stop making fun of the Okies.
A little sensitive. Did the Thunder lose tonight?
A little bit.
Our last meme is just a quick meme where we identify fallacies. We went with this one not because it is obvious like so many out there, but because it really fit this episode. The description is a greeting card type and a woman speaking. She says, I have this crazy idea. What if we fully funded schools and made prisons make up their budget deficit with box tops and money from Target?
So the identified fallacies in that is there's an appeal to logic. You look at that and it sounds logical on its face. It's not if you go into deeper meanings of things and you do a deeper study of it, but it does appeal to logic. It also appeals to emotion. It makes you feel angry because it looks like we don't care about the thing that we should care about the most. There's an association fallacy, which means to argue that because two things share something in common, in this case, it would be federal funding, that the scenario should be exactly the same for both. And it's a non sequitur, which means one thing doesn't have anything to do with something else. The first part has nothing to do with the last part. So, saying that prisons have something to do with schools is a non sequitur.
And that is all we have to say about that. Now, we would like to thank everyone who takes time to listen to us. We also appreciate you dropping us a positive review on iTunes.
You can follow us on Twitter at Rants Reason, and we really appreciate all our Patreon supporters, and you can find us on Patreon as Rants and Reason.
That's right. And we'd like to thank you.
Thank you. Bye.